Hello, Stephen. Good morning and welcome to St. Jude's for our forum series that we're just getting started. It's great to have you with us. Our forum guests will be in here shortly. They're getting a cup of coffee and we will have them here in a moment. Let me give you a little background about our forum today and then about our forum in general. Let me start with our forums in general. So we're starting a new series of forums. These forums will be at 9 a.m. or as close to it as we can conceivably get on Sunday mornings between our two services. Our forum today will be with several folks from the Industrial Areas Foundation Community Organizing Organization. We'll hear more about that in a few minutes, and I'll say a bit as well. But next week, starting next week and leading through May and into June, the Reverend John Benz, former rector of St. Jude's, will be back with us talking about several changes and historical changes and contemporary changes, one being the book After Jesus, Before Christianity, the new book from the West Star Institute, also known as the Jesus Seminar. He will be talking about that book as well as some other sort of related matters. And then he'll be reviving his forum that he did a few years ago on contemporary cultural changes that are happening in the midst of our life together. So that will start next week, May 8th, and will lead all the way through most of June with the Reverend John Benz. Again, those will be at 9 a.m. on Sunday mornings. We will stream those on YouTube, and of course they'll live on YouTube if you want to watch them later. But today, I am very grateful that we have several folks with us from the Industrial Areas Foundation world. So Industrial Areas Foundation, which I'm sure Anna will tell you more about, is a community organizing organization. Locally, we have a new-ish effort called the Silicon Valley Sponsoring Committee, of which our diocese and Santa Maria Urban Ministry and many other Episcopal churches and other faith communities are a part. And so for the last year, we at St. Jude's have been investigating, we've been learning, we've been in conversation with folks in that world about how and if St. Jude's might participate and be an active member of that ongoing effort for building a stronger and more beloved community in this part of our world. And so today, Anna Ng, who is a lead organizer with IAF, Industrial Areas Foundation, is going to be with us. I'll let her say more about her background and what she does. Rabbi Jonathan, I forgot your last name. Prosnit?
Close enough, so there you go.
Okay. Rabbi Jonathan, does that work? Perfect. All right, Rabbi Jonathan will be here. He's from Congregation Beth, and it's great to have him with us today as well. And then Alfonso Mendez, who is the programs manager at Santa Maria Urban Ministry, a ministry of which St. Jude's is intimately and historically familiar. And we're grateful to have you with us, Alfonso. So I'm going to stop talking and invite Anna. Are you first? Great. Come on up and share with us.
Great. Well, good morning. So I think what I'd like to do, because I'd like to be able to have a conversation. Because I think this work is dynamic and you probably will have questions about it. So I'm going to explain what we're doing and tell some stories. Rabbi Jonathan's going to talk a little bit about why Congregation Beth is involved and sort of what he sees this work is, and then Alfonso will do the same. And then we want to open it up to you to get questions and whatnot, because this is an invitation to join in this work and participate. So I think, if this is something that this church is interested in doing, we'd like to have a conversation about it. So I'm Anna Ng. I am a senior organizer with the Industrial Areas Foundation and have been organizing since 2002 in various parts of California, in Texas, and I'm now the lead organizer with Nevadans for the Common Good, and so I'm primarily based in Las Vegas, but still, but commute from time to the Silicon Valley, which I will tell you is actually sometimes a shorter commute on a plane from Las Vegas than it was when I lived in Oakland. So I guess I'll tell you why I became an organizer as a way of maybe explaining a little bit about what this is. I grew up Baptist, and church was very, very important to me. Christianity and my faith was an important part of shaping who I am. And I wanted to change the way things were happening in the world that were not just. I, went to Guatemala in the 90s and recognized that, our country participated in both funding wars as well as being silent around wars. I grew up working poor and was always very angry about different class systems and wanted to do something that could change some of those realities. And so I started working in the nonprofit world and joined a volunteer corps, moved to California. I grew up in Oregon, moved to California, the Central Valley, and eventually was working at a well-meaning nonprofit organization that was doing community work in downtown Fresno. And at the time, the city was building a hospital and exercising eminent domain in some of the poor neighborhoods and was trying to revitalize the downtown core, which was a wonderful thing to do economically for the city. They needed it. But the people who lived in those neighborhoods were largely working class folks, immigrants, a large portion of the African American community, the Hmong refugee community, not a lot of homeowners. And so our organization was trying to hold little conversations with people and strategy sessions to dream about what they could, kind of what the neighborhood would look like as the hospital was being built and as all these changes were taking place. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I was in my 20s, what I realized was that we could go out with butcher paper, we could go out and dream dreams, but folks didn't know how to talk about power, let alone exercise power. And so the decisions were already made, and the people who lived there were not really able to participate in any kind of meaningful way in the decisions the city was making, the decisions that the county was making. And so that was sort of my first experience coming up against power and realizing we didn't have a strategy. And I really didn't like that very much. We were doing lots of good charity work around the edges, but not, the people who lived there weren't able to participate in the decisions that were affecting them. So I decided to get involved in organizing when I found out about the Industrial Areas Foundation. And one of the first, I moved to Los Angeles and worked there I was there for probably 6 years. And early in that time, I was working in Pomona. And we were having conversations in the community. There was a group of about 12 congregations, labor unions, and other nonprofits that were part of the Pomona cluster of what was called 1LA. And we were hearing stories about from teachers about how they didn't have enough help in classrooms, on field trips, in the school, with the class sizes were enormous, and they didn't have enough parent volunteers. And then we were hearing from the parents that they were not allowed on campus because many of them were undocumented. And in order to get on campus, you had to have a state ID. And so they felt like, their children were allowed, but they were not. They had to stay on the curb at pickup. They weren't even allowed on campus to pick up the kids. And meanwhile, the teachers had this shortage of, they're trying to manage field trips, trying to manage classrooms without, the funding for the schools was very low, so they didn't have staff, and they also didn't have the benefit of the parents who wanted to participate and volunteer and help out. And so we began to think about, well, what can we do about this? And so the teachers and the parents, and then the community members started meeting with some of the school district to find out, why is this the case and can we change it? And the school district said, well, we can't change it because, for safety reasons, we've got to do background checks and all of this. And we said, well, isn't there an alternative way we can do this? The Catholic Church has figured out a way for people to be able to come in the churches and volunteer. And so the community really kind of came together. There was a Disciples of Christ church that was right around the corner from a predominantly immigrant Catholic church, and they had never spoken to each other before. Those churches had been in that community for years. And so they began talking to each other. Within the Disciples of Christ church, there was a generational divide between folks who had, they were retired, they'd been there forever, and then younger folks who had come in, and they'd never really talked to each other about their differing realities. So we had small group conversations, and people began teachers and parents and students started talking to each other and learning about each other's realities. So this kind of mixed multitude of institutions came together and decided that they needed to really push the school district to change their policy. So after many, many months of meeting with them, figured out a proposal for alternative forms of identification, a way to do fingerprinting that would work for the school, allowing parents to come on campus. And they had a big action together. It was in December. And so we utilized the Mexican posadas during Christmas time, where you reenact Joseph and Mary looking for a place to stay, and had invited all of the city council members, invited the school board to publicly say, this is a place where immigrants are welcome. Processed around this Presbyterian church. It was a very lively action, came inside the sanctuary, and got a very public commitment from the school superintendent to continue to, or to start allowing parents on campus with this alternative system that the leaders had really come up with for identifying who the parents were. And so they got this victory, and they went on to fight for the school district also. The schools, this was out in the Inland Empire, and there's, it's very hot in the summer, and a lot of the classes were in portables, and they didn't have air conditioning. So they later fought for a bond measure that helped fix some of the air conditioning. But what also happened was relationships were developed that continued over many years between those different communities. And so the work that we do is about changing some of the systems that are unjust, that are making it difficult for families and communities to economically thrive. But it's also about how do we bring together the different parts of our community so that they together have relationship with one another and together have a say in the decisions that are affecting the community. So here in the Silicon Valley, we have organizations all across the country. Here in California, there's an effort in Marin called the Marin Organizing Committee. There's one in Solano, Napa called Common Ground. The closest one to here that has been formed for a while is called COPA, Communities Organized for Power and Action, Relational Power and Action. The R is silent. And then One LA in Los Angeles, and then an organization in the Inland Empire called ICON, and we have an effort building now in Fresno. And then here in the Silicon Valley, there's an effort that is beginning, and actually this afternoon we have one of our leadership meetings, and the strategy team is proposing that we set forth a 12-month goal to launch the formation of the organization next year. So this is a very exciting time. The sponsoring committee launched in 2018, and Congregation Beth was one of the founding institutions in this area that kind of said, we want to build this kind of effort here. And there were about 6 institutions at that point in 2018, and we now have 14 Catholic churches, nonprofits, synagogues, Episcopal churches, different kinds of communities. And the goal is to get at least 30 to be in Santa Clara County to be able to launch an organization. And the work of that organization is really leadership development across those institutions, and then to be able to figure out what are the pressures that families are facing, what are the things that people are going through, and how do we have the collective power to make a difference in a sustained and relational way. So I'm going to let Rabbi John now talk about kind of how he and the congregation got involved, and then Alfonso, and then we'll have a conversation.
Thanks for welcoming me so nicely to St. Jude's. It's great to be here. There is a lot of our institutions are other churches, so I think they said, who can come on a Sunday morning? And they're like, well, we need the rabbi then. But it's great to be here. How blessed it is when brothers and sisters can dwell together in harmony. If Anna sort of set the larger scope of what our organizing networks is, I'll just talk about the local. Our synagogue is in Los Altos. It's actually right on the Los Altos, Palo Alto border. I'm sure some of you have been there. We have a really nice relationship with some of our neighboring Episcopal churches, mostly All Saints in Palo Alto and Christ Church in Los Altos. So it's great to be here at St. Jude's. We are a synagogue and a tradition that prides themselves on work with others. And we are great as a synagogue of volunteering. And we go down to the Community Services Agency in Mountain View and we help in their food pantry. And we go to the Ecumenical Hunger Program every Thanksgiving and every Christmas, and we help with their food delivery. And it's really easy for our synagogue to find volunteers to do those one-off actions. And we're very proud of that too. And we continue to do those work. But our quest to join with a relational organization was to be in dialogue and to hear stories and to recognize that the depth of the stories is the opportunity for action. So we started to do that internally at Beth, and we've had a series of conversations within our members, which in itself was radical. And it seems like pretty standard to have conversations within your membership. Then we realized is we actually don't do it very often. We end up coming to worship on Friday nights or Saturday morning, and we talk about the weather, we talk about the Warriors. Those are 2 important things to talk about, especially the Warriors. But it only takes you so far into sort of what is the depth of people's relationships. So that's how we started. We started with just conversations amongst us. And not just conversations like I mentioned, like real conversations. What are the pressures you're feeling on your family? How is the economic reality of Silicon Valley impacting you and your kids? And those are the types of questions that weren't being surfaced, and if they're not being surfaced at a synagogue or at a church, my hunch is they're not being surfaced anyplace. So to be able to begin this dialogue with a core team of leaders and to be able to dialogue and with a strategy and to listen passionately and to hear. And that's sort of the first step that we took as a synagogue, and we heard some really powerful stories. We heard stories about people who were nervous about the high school culture and their children, and they didn't feel an opportunity to share that. A lot of our students go to Palo Alto high schools, Gunn High School, Pali High School, and people were concerned about their teens' mental health. There was a perception that if you don't get into Yale, you haven't succeeded. And what a terrible way to think, right? And so I spoke to one parent, and they said that he was embarrassed to tell his friends that his child was going to Cañada College. And you think about how devastating is that? How hard is that to hear? Because this is the community college. I know this is the De Anza country, but community college systems in the state have been the beacon for so many. And here, what a wonderful thing that your child can go to community college, but because of the pressures of Palo Alto and Los Altos, this is what we heard. And then the other things we heard is that people wanted to, that's just one example of what came out of these listens. But one of the big examples is that there's a disconnect between the values that people aspired to and the values people's lived. And for whatever reason, we had these deep Jewish core values, this idea of tikkun olam in Hebrew, meaning to sort of play your part in fixing the world, that our community so much aspired to. But the troubles was, how do we actually find a vehicle to living that value? Because it's not easy. And you get caught up with things like carpools and aging parents and the reality of home buying, and it's hard. So those were some of the first steps that we did. And then we had the blessing of being able to continue to have those conversations with our neighbors. As Anna said, now 14, almost 15 institutions, all throughout Santa Clara County. I think Beth, like right up on the border of Palo Alto, we're the farthest north. And then it goes all the way down through San Jose. Lots of institutions in the Sunnyvale area, in the San Jose area, just to be able to dialogue with them. We might sneak into San Mateo County every once in a while, but generally most of it is the San Mateo County relations. It's been very valuable for me to meet different pastors, different priests, to be able to have the same conversations that we had within our own institutions with the larger institutions. I never met somebody that lived in the Sunnyvale Mobile Home Park before I brought here. And it was a very powerful moment for me, to hear the pressures of people of living in the Sunnyvale Mobile Home Park. As rents rise and building housing prices, like what the real fragility that these individuals feel about living in their mobile home park, knowing that if they lose their home, if the mobile home park gets sold to a developer, they will never be able to find another place in Sunnyvale. To sort of hear, what are these real issues that make people think every single day. So to be able to do that in dialogue with other people was very valuable. Was valuable for me and was valuable for our synagogue. And if that was all we did at Passover time, or just after Passover, we have there's a phrase in our Passover liturgy said, Dayenu, which says it would have been enough. And so the thinking and the theology is if God had just brought us through the Red Sea, Dayenu, it would have been enough. But then God brought us to Mount Sinai. And then it would have been enough, Dayenu, but then God brought us to the promised land through the wandering. So if we had just had these dialogues, Dayenu, it would have been enough, right? How great would have been that for a community? But then to recognize that we have these dialogues in a quest for moving and acting within our community with others that might not look like us, that might not pray like us, but to recognize that we are all trying to build a better community for us and our kids and our grandkids is a very, very valuable component. So that's what we are. We really, would love to work more closely with St. Jude's to build the relationship between our two institutions. And if I can help in that in any way, or if you have any questions for me at any point, certainly look forward to getting to know everybody better. So, Alfonso.
Thank you. Good morning. I think some of you know me. My name is Alfonso Mendez, and I work for Santa Maria Urban Ministry. I'm going to start telling you that Santa Maria is a unique place because I'm an immigrant, and I arrived in 2000 to the U.S., and 90% of the families that visit Santa Maria come from immigrant families. And unfortunately, because of the legal status, they have problems to receive some kind of incentives or additional checks. During the COVID-19, several families visited Santa Maria, and they were expressing that I lost my job, and I never received a stimulus check because of my status. So I think it's very important we represent Santa Maria to be part of the Silicon Valley Sponsoring Committee because I can see good people there looking to do the right things for everybody. In other ways, social justice. I invite today families or people from St. Jude's, if you want to be part of the Silicon Valley Sponsoring Committee, to be part of this organization. I can see that people have different religions there, even people that probably they don't have a specific religion, but they are part of there because they want to make a change in their lives. In Santa Maria, we suffer with family. I see family that even though that the kids have a great GPA, 4.5, they couldn't go to the college because they don't receive any federal grant. And I know a couple family that they were crying because, okay, my son is frustrated now because he couldn't apply for DACA because DACA was finished with the other president. And unfortunately, they never qualified to receive DACA. And for that reason, they were devastated because they couldn't send the kids to study wherever they want. And they are in economical disadvantage. Other problem that suffer in Santa Maria is now the city is growing around and they are moving families and they have to move to another cities, to Fresno, to different cities, because they couldn't afford to pay rent. So that kind of stories made me be part of the Silicon Valley. Joanna Shreve, he was the first person who told me about Silicon Valley Sponsoring Committee. And she mentioned that why Alfonso Don Santa Maria is not part of this wonderful organization. And honestly, I've been part for 1.5 years, and my respect to Anna and people that join this group because it's people that they are working hard to make a change in this world. So my invitation today is you want to be part of that, please join the team. And if you have questions, Anna is here, and the Reverend and myself, and I hope that you join our team. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Alfonso and Rabbi John. So the goal, very explicitly, of this organizing effort is to build an institutional strategy with as wide a range of people as possible representing the communities here that has the capacity to participate in the decisions that are affecting their lives. So one of the things that the Silicon Valley Sponsoring Committee was able to do during the pandemic in partnership with the other IAF organizations around the state that have been around longer, so the Silicon Valley group was sort of able to join on. As we were hearing stories from folks when everything shut down, as Alfonso said, people weren't eligible for the stimulus check. They had lost their jobs. They just suddenly had no money and nothing was open. And one way that they could receive some benefit, even though undocumented, would be, or for the undocumented, would be if the earned income tax credit were extended to those who pay their taxes with an ITIN, which is the independent tax number that a lot of immigrants use, even though they don't have a Social Security number. So they pay taxes to the state and the federal government and receive nothing in return. And so, and at the time in California, families making under a certain amount of money were eligible to receive a tax credit, but only if they had a Social Security number. And so the IF organizations had been looking at this for a while and knew that there was a proposal going before the legislature and the governor to expand the EITC so it included the undocumented. But when the pandemic hit and the economy was kind of crashing, the legislature became questionable whether or not that was actually going to even get discussion, and whether the governor would continue to agree to do it, and it was kind of on the rocks. And so we began organizing. And out of all of the conversations that were being had, organized, and this was before anyone even understood what Zoom was, It was May of 2020, so people were still getting used to it. The 7 different organizations organized a Zoom meeting, not a live stream, a Zoom meeting with over 1,000 people in Spanish and English, with a number of bishops, including Bishop Ashby. She had, I think, just gotten here, and had, I think, 3 different legislators who were key to the decision, and really pushed for the Cal EITC to be expanded, and then began pushing on the governor, and it was expanded. It was expanded, even though they weren't sure they were going to do it. That kind of was part of what pushed it over the edge, and they expanded it beyond. We thought it was just going to be for parents who had children under the age of 6, and it ended up getting expanded for anyone under the income threshold. So, our hope is that we can build a counterbalance of power in our communities to be able to push for the things that our communities need, particularly those most on the margins. So that is what's possible, and we'd like to be able to do that locally as well, and are continuing to build, and as Alfonso said, are hopeful that St. Jude's would be interested in it. But I want to open it up for questions and reactions, and how does this sound? What kind of, and is there anything to add from Reverend Aaron?
No, that was great. Fantastic. Okay. Thank you, all of you, for all of that. If you are joining us online, I will relay your question here in the room if you are here in person, so that the folks can hear us online. I'll bring this to you. The magic talking stick. So any questions, comments at the moment? Robin? Then Becky, you ask your hand?
A question for Rabbi Jonathan. How involved is your congregation, or is this all based on the I'm probably using the wrong word, clerical leadership?
So, terrific question. I'm involved, but I am not one of the core leaders that coordinates our effort. So we have different levels of leadership, including, as Anna talked about, the entire network, the entire sponsoring committee as leaderships, so that we have representatives from Beth that are on that sort of body. And then we have leaders within the synagogue that meet and plan as well. So I'm sort of the clergy point person, and I work with, oftentimes what I will do is I will be more apt to work with other rabbis or pastors as part of a clergy network within the area, and then we have lay leaders that do a lot of the most of the other work.
Becky, you have a question? Okay.
So I expect you know, I'm not sure. So our church got involved some years ago with PACT, which is a similar organization, not identical. And so first question would be, I don't know how familiar you are, but I know one of the differences is that PACT is mostly only faith-based organizations, and yours is, it's mobile home park own, residents and all sorts of different groups, right? And I'd like to hear your other thoughts about how they are different, if you know. And then the second thing is that, so I don't know, this was just one of my concerns when we were working with PACT, is that 98% of the actions being taken were with the city of San Jose. And as non-residents of the city of San Jose, it always felt a little bit awkward to go there. I've spoken in front of our city council here many times, but it feels funny to go to San Jose and complain about their city, right? So your thoughts, that's all.
Sure.
Thanks, Becky.
And I'm going to also ask Rabbi John to respond to some of this. But so in terms of the first question, yes, I'm familiar. I mean, I'm familiar with what PACT is, who PACT is. I don't feel comfortable talking about the difference because I've never worked with or for PACT or PICO, so I can't speak to, I mean, who they are. I can talk about what we do. So that's about the extent to which I can respond, and maybe Rabbi John can speak more to that. But to the second piece, I can talk about that. So our work is rooted in the self-interest of the people and the institutions that are part of it. So what is of interest, what you care about, what matters to you as an institution is very important to the broad-based organization that we are building. And you should not get involved if it is not within your self-interest to do so, as an individual or as an institution. And you should also advocate for and shape the decisions that are happening inside of the organizing effort based on what matters to you and what you care about, both the geography as well as the issues. And so the way that we operate, we intentionally, I mean, many of our organizations operate in, a county structure that then have multiple cities. I mean, when I was organizing in LA, it was LA County and then 88 cities, and we were probably in, a third of them. And so you the purpose is not, a singular action agenda. We organize, the most important part of our work are the people. And so it's about what you are learning about your community and what you're learning and able to do as an active citizen with others to impact decisions. That's primary. That is first. And so what we work on and what decision maker we need to engage in order to do that will change over time. Where I'm organizing in Las Vegas, which is Clark County, the city of Las Vegas is actually very small, and the mayor has nothing to do with the Strip, even though she thinks she does. And then there's Henderson, and there's North Las Vegas, and there's Boulder City. And we have people in all of those places. And so we have to learn how to, the county is, and then we have the state. And so there's the county, and everybody gets impacted by the county. But I was just out in Boulder City, which is a little city outside of Las Vegas that likes to be separate. And they were doing neighborhood walks out there, and they're organizing to push their city to use the Rescue Plan Act money in a particular way based on what they learned from what everybody else was doing in Clark County within Nevadans for the Common Good, which is our IAF organization out there. So it's sort of, figuring out how do we operate at those different levels is really dependent on you and others, and kind of, how do we want to operate? But that's not, we're not trying to form an action agenda in a particular place. It's more about the people that are part of the effort, what matters to them, how do they want to get involved, and then we figure out, okay, and who do we need to engage in order to make that happen? Does that make sense? Sure. Okay. And then, Rabbi John, you have any?
So I don't know enough about PACT either. I've heard of them, and I know the synagogue in Los Gatos is connected to them. And the only thing that I think is that what we're hoping to build and what we have built is not a political action organization. It's not and Beth Am is connected to many of these, especially through the Reform movement, the Union of Reform Judaism. But it's not as if we'll go and say, okay, there's a fracking thing on the ballot, we're going to go rally in front of that. Personally, I have no problem if that's something that you or a community would like to do. And there are individuals at Beth Am that find a lot of value in that work. What this is hoping to do is to sort of recognize that out of the strength that we have is the relationships with other churches, synagogues, unions, nonprofits, in a couple other institutions that you could guess, you know. So that is sort of how we operate. In terms of the local component, I hear you. I think that's an important thing that for us to recognize. And I also think that we believe that our children, I live in Woodside, right? And so a child in Woodside is the same as a child in East Palo Alto. A child in Los Altos Hills, where our synagogue is, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in this entire area, is also like a child in Sunnyvale. And so some of the actions that we do, lift up one another in that idea. I'll just give a little example. Beth Am was one of the first institutions to be part of this, and we wanted to sort of have the mix between the relational work and while we were continuing to build, with the IAF across the region, we wanted to think about where do we want to work as well. And one of the places that our synagogue worked a lot was on early childhood education, recognizing that brain development from 0 to 4 is at its highest that will be in anyone's entire life, but access to high quality, affordable preschool was very tricky. So one of the things that our synagogue was able to do is through the relationships that we built, we heard that there was a gap between how preschool teachers can get certified and paid and the teacher's ability to actually get to those courses. This is before COVID. And so through conversations with churches in East Palo Alto and institutions, mostly preschools in East Palo Alto, we were able to work through Beth Am, through our synagogue, through our relationships with some of the community colleges to bring certification programs to East Palo Alto, as opposed to having San Mateo, College of San Mateo's preschool certification program, instead of having the preschool teachers have to go to them. So that was a big deal. I mean, if we think about the access to that and how that we can build the relationships. And it was through a synagogue that cared about this issue because our values teach us that. We had a lot of people who were teaching about at STEP, which is the Stanford education program, connecting us with these churches and preschools in East Palo Alto, as well as a local community college. And so how neat of a mix with that, and did that impact our members specifically? Not entirely. We don't have a lot of 4-year-olds that were going to go to those preschools anyways, but it certainly was a way for us to live our values and also a little bit of our political power. So it was kind of a neat idea. And it wasn't just in front of a city council or just in front of a supervisory meeting, which I thought was neat. It allowed us an opportunity to look outside the box. And we weren't being antagonistic. Like, everybody thought this was a good idea. Right? We weren't going picketing, and sometimes you do that, I think, right? A little, but everybody was on board for this.
I don't know if I've ever picketed in the context. I'm trying to think if I've ever picketed in the context of my professional. Well, I don't think I have.
Great. Thank you. Other questions, comments? Nothing online so far. We have 5 folks joining us online, but they're quiet. Anybody else in the room? Questions?
Well, so maybe I'll just talk about it. So we don't want to, these are all of the institutions that are currently part, and the meeting is this afternoon, and I'm not going to be there because I'm officiating a wedding, but that's a good reason. So our dues paying members to the institution. So each institution pays different amount of dues. I actually don't know it, but our treasurer and our leadership team have that. So our synagogue, as part of our budget, pays dues into the Silicon Valley Sponsoring Committee. We are not run entirely by dues. There's a lot of grants, and the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, is that right? Gave a lot of money. And
the diocese, the Episcopal diocese.
The Episcopal diocese. But we do think that it's important that any institution that joins is a dues-paying institution. That is an important component. It is a demonstration of your care and commitment to doing this work. We're a larger synagogue, and we have some very small churches, and many in between, and we're not saying what that dollar amount should be right now, but I do want to sort of say that we're asking to be part of this. So it means like creating a leadership team, having these bold conversations, to be invigorated within the own community, to be willing to share, to be willing to take risks, to be willing to meet other synagogues and churches. And so those are a lot of the steps. The only thing I would say is if we had just done the internal conversations, that would have been amazing for us. Like, just to have the conversations that we never had it inside our synagogue was valuable enough. And then to be able to go out and do that was even more powerful.
Well, I can put more, I'll put the dollar amount on it. Is that okay? If that is helpful.
That's fine, that's fine.
I assume that's usually the question that doesn't get asked that people want to ask. So I will give the overall kind of where we're headed with this. Because we do want a self-sustaining organization that has the capacity to be self-directed, which means ownership, and ownership costs. I mean, we invest in the things that matter to us, and those are the things that we own. So the goal, I said, we're trying to launch with 30 institutions, and a kind of a very bare bones budget is about $250,000 a year. 300 would be better, but we're being realistic for where the effort is right now. And then we want 90,000 of that to come from the dues contributions. The remaining are from individual contributions, or those that invest from the community. And then a portion of it does come from largely denominational grants and some of the local foundations. But 90,000 of it should be dues contributions. So if you divide 90 by 30, not all of those institutions are able to pay the same. So, somewhere like a floor of 1,000 for the smallest ones, and then up to, 12,000 for the larger ones would be the kind of range that we're looking at. So not, massive amounts of money, but significant, a significant investment, because we think that this is important and significant work.
Great. That's helpful. Thank you, Anna.
All right.
It is getting close to 10, and we have another service at 10:30, so we want to make sure, I know our choir is anxious to get in here and get things ready. I saw our organist looming. You have a question, Robin? A comment? No. Yes, 1 second. We will continue this conversation that we are part of. Feel free to hang around after, chat. We've got coffee and snacks. You are welcome to those, and we will be part of continuing to talk as a community of St. Jude's, as well as with the larger Silicon Valley Sponsoring Committee, about what it looks like, what the work looks like, what it looks like for us to be involved, what it might look like for us to have those kinds of conversations that Rabbi John talked about, that they had, something that Robin and I have been talking about already, because Robin's kind of been our clergy point person with connecting with what's going on. So Robin, your comments, and then I think we'll finish, that'll be us finished up.
So I am going to the meeting this afternoon. I'm shy and introverted, so I would really like somebody else from here to go and sit with me. So I still have the link on my phone to sign up, to register. So if you haven't registered to attend and would like to, I'd appreciate somebody going with me. And after the newcomers lunch, it's 3 to 5 at First Congregational Church on Hamilton and San Jose.
Great. Thanks. Thank you all very much. Can we give our presenters a round of applause of appreciation? Thank you very much. And folks who are joining us online, thanks so much for joining us there. Go get some coffee.